Alright everyone, we have rather unpleasant news today. It happens to be in Sudan. You'll note that a lot of people up until the last 24 hours haven't really said anything about Sudan unless they happen to have one of those channels where they're like, the CIA is always responsible or Russia is always doing something, and then they can cast it off in a political manner. What I would point out is that Sudan has collapsed into civil war. The fighting has spread beyond Khartoum. Hundreds of thousands of people are fleeing, and the de facto government force there is effectively bombing its own capital, while militants now have decided to occupy a biolab that has live polio samples. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, it's simply great. By the way, the last time that you had a problem at a high-level biolab containing some sort of a virus, what happened? Political upheaval and economic upheaval and other stuff that the WEF clearly wants, so maybe this is state-sponsored after all. We'll see what ends up happening. Apparently the scientists that work there are not being allowed to go back into the building, so you've got militants that in some cases have a second-grade education. Sometimes militia groups, they deliberately recruit people who don't really have other possibilities for mobility. And they're like, hey, you get 3 hots in a cot, we'll give you a gun. And they're like, oh, well, that sounds pretty good. It's better than starving, effectively. We'll even pay you a little bit of money. Oh, shit, well, I'm already getting the free food, so I'll just give my mom that. She can buy an extra bag of rice at the market tomorrow. This happens. You now have functionally illiterate individuals, in some cases who do not even believe in germ theory, by the way. That is a thing in some underdeveloped parts of the world, and Sudan is definitely quite underdeveloped, wandering around the hallways next to units that are meant to refrigerate live viral samples. You've got the possibility that power gets knocked out at any given time by a bombing anyway, though, so those samples may end up getting fucked. What if there's gunfire in the hallway there and somebody shoots the polio flask and it explodes everywhere, and then they're wandering through a room where live polio is all over every surface? Yeah, this isn't going to cause problems. Polio has been effectively eradicated in most of the world. The problem is that there are fundamentally populations with low resistance to it, because in most parts of the world, you're getting a polio vaccine, yeah, but they don't continuously revaccinate you, even though there is always the possibility of infection. It's just vastly reduced. This is why when they found polio virus particles in the sewer systems in some parts of New York, in the rat feces, most people, reasonable people, weren't that worried, because it's probably already been there for a long time. This was pertinent to the case earlier this year, late last year, when that individual who had traveled abroad tested positive for polio and then came to New York, and they started testing the rat feces, and they're like, oh my god, polio has gotten into the sewer system. No, it was there. It's in rodent populations anyway. It's just that we don't interact with food that tends to have infected rodent droppings interacting with it. We tend not to eat grain from silos that are full of rodents. We have fairly cleanly standards, and the population is largely herd immune to polio. That's not necessarily the case in Khartoum. That's the problem. Do you really think that the sort of people that join up for some Janjaweed rebel program, to get their 3 hots in a cot and their AK-47, do you really think that they are, number one, that they're highly disease resistant, because clearly they're all the picture of health. There's no malnutrition or anything. Secondly, that they're the kind of people that are going to willingly go to the doctor and get the polio drops or something. This could become a major problem. What if they sell it? They say, hey, I know I have a friend on the black market who would pay a pretty penny for this. I could buy a whole city block for the amount of money that this one vial is worth. Well, let me go give it to him. Let me call my North Korean contact or whatever. Do you think this isn't possible? I hate to tell you, but it is. Now, I'm not saying that this is doomsday. Of course, even if polio breaks out in an area that has relatively little trade and travel with much of the world, it can be contained, but you can't do that while the civil war is going on. More people in the end could end up dying of a polio epidemic there than dying of the actual civil war. And then, of course, it gives other governments, wink wink, nudge nudge, I'm not drawing any parallels to what's happened in the recent past that most people now consider to be a dim and fading memory. It's still fresh in my mind because I have to do this shit for a living. And I have to go through this shit, deal with the government, and I hate it. what happened the last time this occurred? As I said, lockdowns, changes to political systems, travel restrictions. Wouldn't that be fun? End up getting stuck in your country even longer because somebody got polio. And it's possible. The one saving grace is that again, it's geographically isolated. There's not a huge amount going on in Sudan that draws in a lot of tourism. I mean, we've evacuated all the embassy staff at this point, and they've got a ceasefire supposedly right now for a couple of days to allow people to get out of harm's way. We'll see if it holds. Probably not. Probably end up getting abandoned at some point in the next 12 hours or so. There might be fighting over the Biolab. The other side doesn't want the other side to have polio because they think, well, they're not trustworthy enough with it, but we are. Then they shoot the place up and they accidentally lead to a contamination with some virus. There's also measles there. That's less of a concern. Polio is a more significant disease than measles. Measles tends to run its course and the person is sick for a while. They have some red spots. They might have a few scars. It's one of the real reasons that we vaccinate for it is more that than the mortality itself. And then it runs its course. With polio, in a reasonable number of cases, you have significant illness, and some of those lead to permanent paralysis, in part or in whole. FDR had this problem. He couldn't walk for a reason. Well, that'll be wonderful. Thousands of Sudanese children getting crippled up. It'll certainly help them rebuild their economy as well. When half the population can't walk, that'll be wonderful. Sort of like, only a group of complete morons would do this. Hate to tell you, but I'm not sure if they've established which group. I think it's the RSV or RSF militants, actually, who've taken it over. They're not going to know how to manage a biolab. The scientists probably outside right now saying, no, you don't want to go in there. It's more dangerous than your enemy. There's another enemy in there that you don't want to fuck with. But they will be unheeded. Maybe they'll execute the scientists or hold them hostage or something. That's probably the intent, hold the building hostage and force some sort of payment to vacate it, only to reoccupy it a week later. We see cases like this too. It's not like the fighting in Ukraine and Russia, where, at the very least, the people that are fighting there tend to understand that diseases are a thing, and so when they're going into the health center and they come upon a refrigerator full of vials, they know not to open them up and eat the contents or something. That is not necessarily the case with a bunch of former Janjaweed rebels with second, third grade educations. That really is the development index of much of Sudan. That's much of the population, at least of the militants, and at least some of the, again, quasi-government forces. So, link in the description, archived of course. If you want your little dose of fear for the day. Yeah, polio. Yay, wonderful. Crippled kids, crippled adults too, and lots and lots of deformities. Wonderful. The fact that we're even discussing the possibility of an epidemic of polio rising in what would now be a novel area should concern you, I would think. Again, this is officially now a civil war. It's not just a minor conflict. The country is going down in flames. That's about all. Peace out.